Rappaport is from Chariot Solutions, and when you've been in business as long as Mike has, then you know, and if you've been consistently providing value to your customers, to your employees, and you're being recognized for doing the amazing things that these guys are doing, you know you're doing something right, and you're doing a lot of things right. So Mike's an entrepreneur first, but's been in IT for 20 years, and his team is 50 employees strong. And they were recognized as one of the best workplaces in Philadelphia just this last year. So we're very happy to have Mike here to share his story and the values that he based Chariot on, and then the lessons he learned along the way. So everybody, make sure you take really great notes, because after the 30-minute presentation, there's going to be question and answer. So, and then even after that, you know, reach out to, make sure you continue to reach out to people like Mike and just anybody else here, Sam, who's, we're all here to help. So without any further ado, we have Mike Rappaport. If you want that.
I'm going to try without it. I'm going to try to go without a mic because I have a big mouth. And if you have any trouble hearing me at all, let me know, and then I'll try the mic. Thank you very much, Jordan.
Yes.
So as Jordan said, I'm Michael Rappaport. You might have realized by now I'm not the well-known Hollywood actor, Michael Rappaport. If that's who you thought you were coming to see tonight, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I think he's scheduled to speak next month. Just kidding. I'm the CEO and founder of Chariot Solutions. At Chariot, what we do is help our clients improve their bottom lines and grow their businesses through the practical, intelligent application of technology. Basically, we help them build great software to improve their businesses. We've been in business now for more than 8 years, and it has been a very exciting and successful ride. Tonight, I plan to share with you what's been behind our success, including some of the most important, valuable lessons we learned along the way. Now, I can talk about Chariot for hours, and we don't have hours. And so this is the condensed version. I've done my best. I had to cut a few things out, and I may go quickly through others. But at the end, as Jordan mentioned, we will have time for questions. Yes. So a little bit about my background. I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember. I graduated high school when I was 16 and had already been through a number of entrepreneurial ventures, some more successful than others, some more legal than others also, but I was a kid. But it was after that, after I graduated high school, I got my first real job doing software development full-time while going to school at night. I went to Drexel University for what seemed like forever. It almost was forever, but I did finish. And what I studied was really computers and business. And computers and business and where they intersect, that's been my passion now for the past 25 years. In 1988, I had a chance to be part of a group that started a software company as a wholly owned subsidiary out of another company. We developed and marketed a suite of accounting and distribution modules. This is one commercial package. 4 years later, after we started it, I had a chance, I was put in position and given the responsibility for running this business for the parent company. I did so for 10 years. It was a great ride, and I learned a lot, but that's another story for another day. Tonight, I just wanted to point out a couple of things that happened toward the end of that run that impacted what ultimately became Chariot Solutions. So starting in 1999, at this software company, we decided we needed to re-engineer our product. We needed to upgrade our technology platform. And we chose to re-engineer it into Java technology. We quickly learned that while Java has many great strengths, it has one glaring weakness. It was even more glaring back then, and that lies in its complexity. Basically, average developers could not be effective or productive with Java unless, first, they developed or had the reusable frameworks they can work with. Once these reusable frameworks were there for software development, for reporting, and for testing, an average developer can be very productive. Problem is these frameworks were not available, and to build them basically takes a rocket scientist. It takes skills that were very, very hard to find. And we found that out firsthand. As a software company, We couldn't afford to guess. We had to have some of these people, the top tier of Java talent. We'll call them high-end Java architects. As incredibly difficult as they were to find and to attract, we stuck with it, and through persistence and some good luck, we were able to put together a world-class team at this software company. And in addition to learning of this imbalance between supply and demand for this type of talent, clearly the demand greatly outweighed the supply. There was such a short supply out there. But I also learned another lesson during that time that was very helpful in the future, and that was I learned what it takes to attract and motivate this type of top talent. And again, I kept that in my pocket for later use. One of the things that comes to mind first is all of these people, they share this need for constant learning. And I didn't know that beforehand, and I've been in this space for quite some time. Now, in 2001, the parent company decided to sell the software company, and that left me wondering what I was going to do next. The idea of taking a regular job and working for someone wasn't that appealing to me, and so I knew I needed to come up with something. What I did next was ask for help. I went out, I had a group of mentors that I had stayed in touch with over the years, a group of entrepreneurs that had seen great success many times over, long before I ever had, and that were generous enough to spend their time, to give me their time and their assistance. And it really was the best decision I ever made. And with the help of this group of mentors, they put things in perspective for me. They had us look at, before we started this and figuring out what we were going to do, what do you have? What do you bring to the table? What are your existing assets? And then let's compare that with what the market needs as it relates to those assets. And so, as I just mentioned earlier, what we really had actually was this A-team from my prior company. Superstars that had proven themselves over and over, successful in every project put in front of them, and there were some very challenging projects. And we knew that the market, we knew firsthand from our own experience, that the market really needed these people, especially, again, as it relates to Java technology, to really get over the hump. Of course, we also had to consider the availability of money at that time. Already late 2001, early 2002, the economy was already in bad shape, and that limited our options to some degree. We weren't going to be able to raise millions and invest all this time and money in building this enterprise software product that later we would bring to market. That was not going to be feasible for us. And this really led us down the service company path. So the rough idea of what we planned to do is to help organizations overcome the complexities of Java. As far as the lessons learned, when I look back, as I did in preparing this presentation, as a CEO, I am constantly trying to validate or invalidate my decisions. And that's what I get paid to do, is to make decisions. And so it's really important, even if it was the wrong decision, to know, to feel at least like you know at the end, has a tremendous amount of value. And what I got out of this early period was, first, my decision to ask for help was, as I said, it was the greatest idea. And since then, I've asked for help quite a bit. It's ironic that I ask for help so much more now than I did earlier in my career when I probably needed more help. Better late than never. And most important, for me, for the first time in my career, I made a decision to allow my success to be dependent on other people. I was not planning to go out and learn Java so that I can help our clients overcome its complexities. I knew what I had to do is focus on the team. It was all about what I've talked about here. First was what we were going to do and a little bit about how we were going to do it, but that's not where my focus was. My focus was on who was going to do it, and more importantly, who was going to be my management team and my partners in this endeavor. And that's a group that I needed to bet on, quite frankly. So the entire team was involved from the beginning in the business planning process. And it all starts with our value proposition. This is a tad bit challenging, and I had to go a little bit technical here, because to understand Chariot's real value, I first need to share with you a hidden truth about the software development community in general. And what I'm going to share with you is commonly known in the IT world, but I'm going to assume that some of you are not professional technologists, so you might be hearing this for the first time. This is not specific to Chariot, but true of the general group of professional software developers in the workplace today. The bottom line is that only a very small subset of professional software developers are worth their weight. Only a very small percentage, and I'll put that at 15% for the sake of argument, are truly qualified to provide enough value to be worth using. There might be an argument for the 85% because 15% only goes so far. You run out of them. And in many cases, you're better off using someone from the 85% than no one. But it's difficult to find any other argument for them. And it has a lot to do with talent, not really experience so much. It's like many specialties, like being an artist or a surgeon. Sometimes you just may not have the skills or what it takes naturally. But in most of those professions, you find out before you get finished school. If you weren't cut out to be a surgeon, I sure hope there aren't many surgeons out there that are not qualified to do their job. Software is different. And it's really this top tier. And to give you an example, everyone can learn a language like Java. That's easy. This top tier, this top 15%, they're capable of creating a language. Not that they do this, they don't need to do this in most cases, but it's how they think. It's their understanding. It's so much stronger of an understanding of what's happening behind the scenes and of the platform and their ability to see ahead and look to the future. It makes them capable of designing, coming up with very strong designs for software. Now, no matter how good you are at coding or developing the software, if the design isn't right, it's going to be a failure. These are people that can get the most out of all the tools available to them. Now, I'll go so far as to bet that if we come up with a project that's sufficiently complex and meaty, that we take one of these top-tier software developers, and that they'll be able to get the job done faster than a team of 2 from the middle tier. I'm not really going out on a limb with that one. I mean, the number really, in my mind, is much more like 3, but 2 is enough to make the argument, and it still is enough to show the value here. Not only will the product be produced faster, that's the smaller part. The most important part is it'll do its job better. And again, it has a lot to do with design, but the people in the top tier, what they produce, there's a reason why this was being developed. And what they produce performs much better. It does what it's supposed to do much better. So not only do they do it faster, and they get paid more in salary, but they don't get paid double, so it costs you less to build it. But that's not even the biggest return. It's well documented that the major cost of any software product happens after you put it in production. You might work on it for 6 months, and then you put it in production for 6 years or 8 years. And it's that cost, the maintenance cost, if you will, that really is where you spend most of your money. And again, I will make the claim that the top tier, the superstar developers, will produce a product that not only performs better, but it's also more stable, so it will cost you much less to maintain, and it will be in production longer because of these things. It's a very strong argument. It's all about return on investment. So there are reasonable explanations as to why so many unqualified software developers make it into the workforce. Because I have a lot to talk about in a short period of time, for the sake of time, I'm going to ask you to go with me on this. And afterwards, or again, we'll leave time for questions, I can get into that with you. But as I said, this is not a secret in the IT space. Most organizations have addressed this by going after their share of this top talent. And what we see in recent years is some form of ratio where they want, if you look at a project team, they'll have maybe 1 superstar for every 4 or 5 mid-level developers. And that's a big improvement from what was done prior. But we tried something different. Before we started Chariot, we had a theory at my old software company. And that was that by putting together only the top talent, creating obviously much smaller teams, that this would result in much more productivity, much better results. It sounded good. It was not my idea. I wish I could take credit for it. But it sounded good, but it also smelled like one of those things that sounds good but doesn't really translate well into practice. Something about Indians and chiefs, something like that. In fact, it translated extremely well. It worked out beautifully for us, so well, in fact, that when we did start Chariot Solutions years later, we committed to only hiring the best, most qualified consultants. We felt that much smaller teams of more highly skilled, well-rounded members would be our secret sauce and would provide us with our greatest competitive advantage. And it has. Of course, there's a lot of competition vying for that top 15%, so it's not as easy as it sounds, which led us to believe that we needed to create an environment that was perfect or ideal for these types of individuals. So we strayed a bit from the typical service company model. And for the sake of this discussion, I'll use an oversimplified example. Let's assume that most service businesses allow for 10% of their consultants' time to be dedicated to paid time off, sick, vacation, holiday, and so on. And they strive for 90% utilization, which means billed hours, the remaining 90%. And that also may sound unachievable, but in some of these service industries like law and accounting, people work a lot of hours in order to make that happen. But let's just say if you charge an average market rate and you get close to your 90% utilization, that you should end up with a reasonable profit. Let's say 10% profit, 10% of your top line revenue. We knew that wouldn't work for us at Chariot because these type of individuals would not be thrilled if they're expected to bill for 90% of their time. You could see that wouldn't work out. And so we had to come up with something different. And we decided that we would build in an investment of an additional 10% of their time in professional development for our consultants. That means sending them to conferences, getting them training. In many cases, that means allocating time for them to contribute to open source projects or just to research new technologies that are out there. These are people that don't have difficulty finding a job, and so we needed every advantage we can to attract them and to retain them. And we felt this would directly address their need for constant learning. And so it also helps Chariot, because for us, technology is changing all the time. We need to stay ahead, and that doesn't happen by magic. Really, you need to set aside time to do it. The problem is if 10% goes to PTO and 10% goes to professional development, the best we could hope for is 80% utilization. So the real question was, how will we make a profit? And the answer is that we would command a premium because we can get so much more done and with so much less, that we would command a premium when it comes to hourly rate. And even at a premium, charging a premium for our services, our clients will make out like bandits. But this would allow us to end up with a reasonable profit. And this is what we went with. And we made the decision during this time that our goal was to be the best at what we do. Basically, we agreed that if we don't believe we're the best at a certain service, that we either need to invest in becoming the best or we shouldn't offer that service. And we have stuck with that now for quite some time. We chose quality over quantity. This model is not a model that supports exponential growth. Clearly, the supply side is a limiting factor. You can grow, but again, it's hard to find, and it takes time to take from this 15%. And we've even come up with some ways to add some more people to that 15%. But still, you're not looking at exponential growth. You're sacrificing, in some ways, growth rate for quality. That said, we've been able to build a lot of value into our business through our brand, not just through revenue and profits. Just a couple other things I'll point out that might have strayed a bit from the norm is, in order to command a premium, you can do all the best work and be successful in every job, but if no one knows about it, it's going to be a challenge. And so we knew we needed to invest in marketing, and that meant trial and error. And we have tried many things and found what works best for us and have done more of that. So it's be the best at what we do and become known as such. In terms of fundraising, we raised a very modest amount of money from private investors at that time. So we started Chariot with 10 employees and 10 board members. We were extremely lucky to have attracted this board. And this was a very special and, to me, unique group. Together, what I found people had in common was this vision. More than anything else, it was vision that I'd say. Our employees, they had very much of a West Coast, well, what you might call West Coast mentality. I'd call an open source mentality, long before that was fashionable here. And our board members, once they found that we were coachable, they became extremely engaged. And the more engaged and the more involved they became, obviously the more valuable they were. One of our board members, original board members, was Buck Bell. And Buck was a legend in the technology space, especially locally. He was one of the co-founders of Safeguard back in the 1950s. And he went on to run Safeguard Business Systems for many years and was tremendously successful, overwhelmingly successful in what he did. Now, Buck passed away last year, but not before he had a very full life and had a very positive impact on just a ton of people. I'm just one of those people. But in a very short period of time, he became my primary role model in business, and it's just really why I bring him up. Part of it is what I found out from others, my other mentors, people that had done business with Buck over the years. I met him toward the end of his life. They all say the same thing. It all starts with integrity. This is a man that was known for his honor and his integrity, and his being fair and reasonable. And as it was put to me by one of my mentors, Buck always made sure the guy on the other side of the table got a fair deal. I know that's not politically correct, but that is how it was put to me. And his thoughts were that if there's not enough value in a deal for both sides to make out really well, then it's not a deal worth doing. And the bottom line to me is that Buck was proof that you can achieve all of your dreams as an entrepreneur in business, and you can make a killing along the way without ever having to lie, cheat, or steal to get there. And with Buck's help and the rest of the board and the employees, we started with what was most important to us, and that was our core values. And we felt that we agree on our core values, and we will use those values to determine our company-wide goals and objectives, and to prioritize those goals and objectives, which is what we use for day-to-day decisions. Now, that all starts with integrity and professionalism. And for us, that means being true to our clients and prospects and partners and each other. For me, it means having enough trust and confidence in the team to support decisions that go against my own personal opinion. And that happens. It's not the majority of the time, but it does happen. Well, fortunately, we felt that hiring discipline would be our key to success and would be our greatest competitive advantage. Otherwise, I don't know that we would have stuck it out. Over the course of the past 8 years, on average, we've had to interview 35 candidates for every one that we hire. Had we not believed so much in this, it would have been difficult to stick with. We may never win awards for fastest growth or most profit or anything like that, but we will continue to win awards and praise in the areas of client and employee satisfaction. This organization-wide commitment to quality over quantity is shared. I mentioned about marketing and building our brand and marketing it. And communication. On a consulting firm like ours, people are physically scattered all the time. And so it takes a concerted effort to bring people together, both physically sometimes and virtually others, and to share information so that they can be more valuable. On our team, you never know where the next great idea will come from, and the more they know about what's going on, the more likely it is that someone can contribute. So next, I'd like to share with you some of our early challenges and how we got past them, and most importantly, the lessons we learned from that. Our first week in business, we got a major, major break. A third party came to us with a job that was right up our alley. It required more people than we had at the time, and the billing rate was good, and we could work as many hours as we could handle. It was just beautiful. Seemed like a gold mine. First month was like gangbusters. Second month, same thing, like gangbusters. Then one day, the client got acquired. And the next day, we found out all outsourced IT projects were canceled. Now, when you start up, it's difficult to not have all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak, or most of your eggs in very few baskets, which is where we were. This particular account accounted for more than 70% of our revenue at the time. So our first big break actually turned into our first big crisis a couple of months later. While business was proceeding according to plan, we had a cash situation. We really didn't raise enough to begin with, and that's because of how enjoyable it was for me to raise money. Not true. And so we got to the point where it appeared that we had a working capital issue. We were going to dip where we couldn't afford to dip, and we were going to run out of money. And after 6 months in business, we got help from our board as usual. And the lesson learned of don't panic. It's not for a cash crisis, it's for any crisis. It's always the same. Don't panic, stay calm, let's consider our options. The board, we didn't need to raise much money, so the board suggested we make a presentation to a local investment group called Lure. This is an informal group where you make a presentation, people sign up individually if they're interested, and then you negotiate individually with these independent investors. We made a presentation in January of 2003. Many people signed up, so we felt good. We knew we'd be able to get what we needed. But we did end up going a different route. We ended up not needing that. We closed a deal with a new customer that same week that had great payment terms, and we had just completed a job for one of our very few existing customers. They had given us a job to prove ourselves, essentially a smaller job. And once we proved ourselves, we really blew them away on that project. They awarded us a much larger project. We then offered them an additional discount for paying within 10 days. And that was enough to get us past this crisis, this cash crisis. But it was really important to me to know of some of the options that were out there, just in case that was to ever happen again. Unfortunately, we have never looked back. For us, our sales message or selling has been a challenge because there's two groups we sell to. We sell to technology folks. That's not a great challenge. For us, that's the path of least resistance. Largely because of all that time I spent explaining the value proposition. Well, that's understood already. But selling to the business community, it's hard not to sell to the business community. In most cases, that's who holds the budgets. And that's who stands to benefit the most from these projects. And so for us, it was a great challenge, and it continues to be a challenge, to clearly articulate our message to this group. You know, they look at it and say, well, this one's $150 an hour and this one's $100 an hour. Why would I go with $150 an hour? And it's not the easiest answer in the world. Now, we do much better these days with our message to these people. It was much more effective, but we're still working on this. And the lesson here is that doesn't go away. That has to be part of your ongoing periodic planning. It's revisited on a regular basis. You should get the feel already that there's a lot of emphasis in our place on recruiting and retention, every bit as much, if not more, than there is on sales. Hire the best and treat them well. Again, that's easier to do because we see our people as our greatest competitive advantage. And deliveries is what we do for our customers. Do whatever it takes. I mean, I look at this and I don't hear many companies out there saying we're not going to do what it takes for our customers, or we're going to treat our employees poorly, or everyone says these types of things. What it really comes down to, though, is putting your customers and your employees ahead of your company, because there's a cost to this. It's all easy to say. And to us, we look at it as a long-term approach, and we always have. It's all about the relationships. And we believe, and again, we set out to be the best at what we do. If someone is not thrilled at the end of it, or we have not met the level of success we expected, we take responsibility for that. And that costs. It all costs money, but we look at that as an investment. And as a result, we end up with a very loyal customer base that gives us repeat business over time. And obviously, very, very happy employees. So far, most of the time has been spent in our early years, our first few years in business. But adapting to changing conditions is a subject and an exercise that I think all entrepreneurs need to do in any business. Technology changes faster than most, but everything changes over time. And so I wanted to give some examples for us. We started out developing these reusable frameworks for our customers because they weren't there. Today, we don't need to do that. In the last 5 years, many frameworks have cropped up, commercial and open source. And some of them are outstanding, very comprehensive and very strong. So these days, it's different. We master those frameworks, and we help our clients get the most out of those frameworks. And new tools and platforms are always coming out. But today, we're overwhelmed by the activity in the mobile space. And in addition to building apps that you see on the iPhone for 99 cents and so on, for us and our customers, this is a major opportunity to extend their reach down to the handheld device. And in many cases, they've spent millions to bring what they have to the internet and get so far as the laptop or the desktop. Well, here, for a fraction of that cost, they can go one step further and make their way to the device that all of us are carrying on us. And let's face it, half the time it's in front of people's faces. It has a lot of value. It's a tremendous opportunity. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as it should be. because the iPhone requires one type of technology. It's Objective-C. And the Android platform, you could write in Java. And then there's BlackBerry's, their own proprietary platform, and Windows 7, and it goes on. And it's not feasible to build 5 or 6 different programs to do the same exact thing in different languages. It would be a maintenance nightmare. There are solutions out there. There actually are frameworks out there where you can write this once in one language and deploy to these different platforms. It's also not quite as easy as it sounds, and that's not great for every situation, but there are solutions to this. And today, we spend a lot of our time working with our clients in the planning phase. I would say in the mobile arena, 50% of our time is spent helping with planning and figuring these things out. And 50% right now is spent on doing the development on these platforms. We launched a formal training and education practice at Chariot last year, and we felt this was a great complement to our existing business. Not only would it be its own profit center, but when we do public training, the people in the seats, our students, they represent, in many cases, if they're learning these technologies, they work for a prospect or a customer of ours. And when they need help, we want to make sure they know where to go. In other cases, they represent recruiting candidates that we might be going after at some point in the future. So there are more benefits we get from the training practice than what meets the eye. Now, partnerships are something that we have invested in from day one. We have not hit the home run with any one partner, but collectively, over the years, partners have proven to be a very valuable source of leads for us at Chariot, and we continue to work on these and try to find out the ones that are best for us. The last topic about growth is really about managing growth while maintaining culture. You should have a feel at this point that we're all about our culture. That's everything we are, and if we lose that, I think we lose our advantage here. And I worried when we were 25 people that when we got to be 50 people, how will we maintain this culture? And knock wood, we've been able to do so far. Now I worry when we're 100 people, how are we going to be able to keep this culture? And I do. It's something that I worry about and I think about all the time, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. So I put a few of the things down in summary, some of the main points from these other slides. Now, all businesses are different. I know that. This is not meant to be a roadmap of what will work for you. Not at all. My hopes are that by understanding what worked for us, it will give you some ideas, it will have some value for you, and maybe some of that really will work for you. And finally, what has happened? How has this worked out for us? So when I listed our core values, and that's everything we're all about, to us, that just seemed like doing the right thing. And the long-term approach, and being unselfish and putting clients and employees ahead of company, again, seemed like the right thing to do. It's easy to do that type of thing. But what's interesting is somehow that has resulted in such a strong business, in a profitable, sustainable, growing business with a strong following of loyal employees, customers, investors, and friends. And it has all paid out, but it took a long-term focus. And I mention investors here because you also have to choose the right investors. We knew we needed investors that had a long-term focus. If they needed that return instantly, this model doesn't work for that. It requires some patience. So now I'd like to open it up for questions.
Okay. Regarding the developer and the quality of developers, there's talk a lot in the startup community around Philadelphia about the lack of a developer pool. How do you find that you're bringing developers out of the area, or are you just able to tap into the best of the best around here? I mean, I find it difficult to find developers.
Okay, so just to repeat the question is there's been talk in the area that there's a short supply of these types of developers, the good developers. And I second that motion. And we have experienced that over and over again. There's no question about it. And we need a lot of them. And as far as bringing them in, yes, we bring them in from out of town. We have to get them from wherever we can. And it's more challenging bringing them in from out of town. You end up hiring people, and sometimes they don't ever actually make it to the job. But we are dependent on this type of person. And more people that realize this value proposition, they also realize they need that top 15%. It's a major challenge. I don't have the answer, the solution, except that we've experienced that very much, and so have our customers. Yes?
How important is it, do you find that when working with developers that you are in the same office? I think I heard you say something before that says sometimes your employees are spread around. You know, it's very common for developers to work remote, but it sounds like you're trying to bring them into your offices here in Philly.
It helps to bring, okay, so the question was about involving working remotely versus working together as teams. There's a big advantage to working together. And when I say remotely, in many cases, that means they're actually working at a client site with their team. Some people do work from home. It all depends on the project, but we find big benefit to working together, physically being together. If you look at our office, and today more than half of our work is done at Chariot. Didn't used to be like that. We were always on site at the clients. But our office is all set up in these project rooms where there's 4 people are in the same room. Instead of having desks, they're all surrounded by a counter. There's a table in the center. They can close the door. They work together, and they work. Today, what we use is what's called an agile methodology. It requires a great deal of communication. Development always required that to be successful, just not everyone knew it. So I do find a big benefit to them working together, and we're trying to get more of that.
Is that like a deal when you're doing hiring? Is that a deal breaker for you if people won't relocate to Philly, or if you find someone great in Chicago, will you?
It's a deal breaker in most cases. What we'll do with someone in Chicago is we may use them as we do have a small pool of subcontractors. So we have 50-some employees, but we also have about 10 contractors out there that are every bit, we know how good they are. They're in that top 15%, but for one reason or another, it doesn't work out to have them join us full time.
Thank you.
Yes?
Since the quality of the work is so important to the whole model, how do you tend to quantify that to customers? Because it's kind of a gray area, it kind of works, in other words, you can't see it, it's kind of like.
Well, that forces us to focus. That's the question. Well, I think everyone heard that question. Rick speaks loudly enough. Okay. So the question was about quality and how do we get that message across to prospects, essentially. And for us, we have to focus on not the strongest point. The strongest point is total cost over the life of this product, but that would take a leap of faith up front for someone to buy into. So we have to go back to development cost. For someone to consider hourly rate without considering hours doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so we put our money where our mouths are. We can do this with half the team size. And so if you just look at total cost, you see that it will cost you less to get this done. Again, that's not this significant. The real impact happens later. But as far as selling, that's part of the message, and that's been part of the challenge. Yes?
Okay, I have 2 questions. One, I think the training education model is phenomenal. Are you charging for that, or what's the setup there?
So this question about training and education and the training and education model and if we charge for it or how we're structured. We do charge for it. Right now, we sell private training on our own to clients, or we'll bring in and do training just for one company at a time for many students. Most of the courses are public training courses that are filled by companies that are out there. Again, I mentioned these frameworks that exist. There are companies out there and all they do is work on the intellectual property. We provide training on these for these technologies, and they fill the seats. They sell the seats, it's public training, we put on the classes.
And then the second question I had is, you're talking about training the best talent. So it's clearly obvious that if I'm a company looking for that talent, I'm going to go to Chariot Solutions. How do you find, is there a certain percentage that you find that you're losing people to your competitors because of that? That it's an easy breeding ground because you're open to saying we're hiring the best people. Well, let me look at Chariot Solutions instead of.
Sure. So the question is, if everyone knows that Chariot Solutions only hires the best, do I lose people to others that want to poach from our group, essentially? Fortunately, we haven't. And the only reason I can imagine is because of this environment, because they're so happy where they are. Jordan mentioned about the top workplace. I mean, I expected to be listed in the top amongst the top, I think for small companies, 50 to 150 employees, they looked at 75 companies and 40 made the finals. And I expected to be on that 40 because this really comes from the employees. I didn't expect to be number one. And we were number one. That told me a lot. And the answer that I have there really is we need to remain number one so we're the best place. It's not attractive for them to go elsewhere. And that's a challenge. And that's a challenge moving forward. And the truth of the matter is people know of us and we help our clients. Sometimes I'm not in position to hire somebody. That's really good. Our clients don't even need to interview these people. If they know they made it past our interview process, they will hire them. And so, yes, people know about this, and I'm sure people have gone after our people. But fortunately, our turnover has been incredibly low. I knock wood when I say that. We've lost on average one person per year since we've been in business. And in the IT space, that's unheard of. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit more about how in your service-based model, where you're still investing a lot in your employees and your business, how you're able to grow and scale without costs overtaking your business and adding additional cash flow pressures?
Okay, so with the additional investment that we're making in our employees over time, how do we make this work financially?
Right.
I guess is really what you're asking. So, and that's a challenge. You know, on paper it looked like if we did this, we would end up with a bottom line that's 10% of our top line. Doesn't really work out that way, especially when you make your decisions based on the priorities I showed up here. You sacrifice dollars in that, and you make less of a profit. But again, and for us, it does come down to hourly rate. We have to prove ourselves over and over again that we're a steal and a great value, even at these rates. And for us, over time, the rates have gone up. Our average rate has gone up, and it needs to. That's the only way we can really support this model.
And I guess a follow-up question, how responsive were your customers initially to the premium prices?
How responsive were our customers initially to the premium prices? Some more responsive than others. What happened was we went out and we, like the pharmaceutical industry, we went to sell and we would go out and someone would say to us, here's what we want. We've procured these services before we know what we want. We want one superstar architect, senior architect. We want 3 developers. We want a quality assurance person. We want a business analyst. We'll take this 6-person team. We'll give you 6 months to get the job done, and we want to pay an average rate or a blended rate of $100 an hour. We would learn the requirements, and we would come back and say, well, do you mind if we propose something a little bit different? And they say, what do you have in mind? And we say, well, we would like to propose a team of 3 well-rounded software architects. We will involve some time from business analysts and QA resources at different periods of time. And this team will get the job done in the same 6 months. It will be $150 an hour, and you can do the math. But once again, the great savings are later. But that really is how it worked. Now, how responsive were they? Sometimes they were like, hey, yeah, sure, see you later. Many times. And so again, the path of least resistance. For us in the early days, we focused more on the technology side. Because on the technology side, they actually know what you're saying because they've experienced it themselves and they've seen that out there. And so that was our path of least resistance, our low-hanging fruit. Yes?
How did you attract the top talent, as you say, initially? I mean, you didn't have any reputation, now you do.
Right.
But, and you probably didn't have a whole lot of money to pay them. How did you actually accomplish that?
So how do we attract the top talent initially? That's a great question. We had put together this team. Part of it is we worked so hard. I couldn't believe how difficult it was to find these stud Java architects out there. And as a matter of fact, the first thing I did, I ended up going on the West Coast to find a consultant because I really couldn't find someone locally and I couldn't wait. That consultant pointed me to someone locally. He knew there was someone that worked for EDS for 10 years, was a big player in the Java community space. And we hired this person, it was local, and he pointed me to someone else. The person, Aaron Mulder, who is now our CTO. And we hired Aaron, and the funny thing is, when we hired Aaron, suddenly people came out of the woodwork. And I would call that the Aaron Mulder fan club initially, that were the real deal. Where were these people when we were looking for them? I don't know. But these people attract each other.
So you hired people with a reputation.
Correct, correct. I can't say that we saw the future to do that. We did that because we needed experts. But that's what it translated into.
You had no track record and all those kind of things?
Well, in the software company, I sometimes wonder how we convinced Aaron, in this case, to work for us. I guess he thought it was a cool project, this re-engineering project. I'm not really sure. Chariot's perfect for him. It's different. It's an ideal setup. Yes?
Yeah, and I wonder, you're a relatively young company, and I'm curious about a couple of things that relate to that. One is the average age of the people that when you first started, the average age as they are now, and then the larger question, which is, very good people in a dramatically changing environment sometimes don't change as the environment changes. So that either means that you have to extend that base of new young people to take the slack up, or you have to or replace the people you already have. How are you developing, how do you look forward over the next decade? So you've still got that initial energy of that new young group, relatively speaking, with lots of fierce ages. But looking forward, that group that is still willing to focus and be attentive to the task and put that extra energy in for a new project as they get into their mid-40s and 50s or 60s or whatever. How are you gonna take that into account?
Okay. So the question relates to the age of our initial group, and as time goes on and people get older, their ability to change and how things are today, as I take that question. That's an interesting question. I would say when we started, I know we were a young, in general, a young group. And the reason I know that is when it looked like we were going to run out of money, I looked at anyone that worked for us that had a family. And I spoke to that person and said, listen, go do what you need to do. I'll help you. I know people are looking, that will kill to have you work for them. I'll come get you someday. We're going to make this thing work, but you have a family that you have to think about. And you know what? We only had a few that had families. Today it's completely different. Today we might have only a few that don't have families. But in terms of their ability to change, this group, I can't say enough about this group. See, I talked about the top 15%. For us, it's not even the top 15%. Because when you take that top 15%, they have the technical talent. But now factor in their understanding of business. We're working in the business world. You have to understand budgets and scope creep and concepts like that. That narrows it down further. And then if you take the technologies we work in, that narrows it down even further. And finally, and the most important question we ask any candidate, the most important question that I ever see answered on our wiki that has all the intelligence from the interview process is, would you want this person on your team? It's all about the team player and their ability to think. And when I look at the write-ups, the people we hire, the people that are hacking on their own, it doesn't matter what their age is. Overall, I'd say we're a young group, and yet we have people all different ages. But the mentality is young. That's how it seems to me. And these are people that hack on their own. I give them some time, but that doesn't stop them from doing it on their own on a regular basis. And that's what we look for. It's that passion that really sets them apart. Not everyone has worked. Not every hire has been one of those people. We've had a few that got in that just weren't perfect for us.
Do you have a systematic evaluation process, or is it intuitive and sort of self-evident when people are losing traction?
But we do have a formal process, evaluation process. Still, that said, I think our process is more focused around what these people want. What can we do? It's not so much evaluating that they're superstars, and I can't speak enough. Our track record, when I tell people, or if I was to tell people our real track record, they'd probably think I was making it up, especially in the software space. It's a very poor history for project success. I can't imagine another industry getting away with that kind of a record. It's embarrassing for all of us in that industry. But our track record would be good in any industry. And so these people are so great. Really, the evaluation process is, what do you need to learn? What do you want to focus on? Where is your passion? And how can we help? Okay?
It seems like you've grown very organically. And I'm just wondering have you promoted software folks into management positions, or have you found outside managers? I mean, 50 people, you got to have some people kind of doing the supervisor stuff.
Absolutely. Well, interestingly enough, we formed our management team. When we only had 10 people, we had a management team of 5, roughly. And today, we have a management team of 6. Almost the same, and it's almost the same people. But as you should get a feel from me that these people are involved in everything we're doing. They have a say. Some of the ideas that we've had that are phenomenal have come from, most of them don't come from the management team. And so it's not a vertical type of company where you can grow and you get from one level to the next, and you're looking to be management in a management position. Their roles change. You change from being a supporting member on a team to being a team leader, and from being an expert to being a well-known expert that speaks publicly around the world in some cases. But again, it's just not much of that structure. It's a fairly flat organization. But the management team, we don't write code. That's a different thing. Yes?
Earlier you said that when you started, you had to do some projects to prove yourself. Is that a good way to start? Like, should you be pitching ideas to certain ones, and how do you do that?
So the question earlier, I mentioned that we had to do some projects to prove ourselves. And I guess, is that really a good idea and a good approach? To me, first of all, it's a necessary. To me, it's a necessary evil. It would be nice to not have to do that. But if I'm up here claiming that my company can do the work with half the team size, I need to put my money where my mouth is, or it's not going to go anywhere. So for us, we felt confident we were the real deal and we were the best at what we do. But again, we had to prove that. And then the example I brought up of one of our early customers, they gave us a $100,000 job. It was time and materials. It was not a fixed price job. It was roughly $100,000. They wanted to see how we did on this job. We didn't know what was to come after that. But again, having blown them away on that job, then they gave us the $1 million job. And it changed our business. You know, that was early on, it was huge for us. So I think you have to be willing to do that. I don't like to sell something I can't prove, or I'm not willing to try to prove. And sometimes that means risking dollars.
Right. Did you have a contract with them? Like, what if, there was a circumstance where they didn't feel as though you did good enough? Was there a contract saying if we only satisfied you for a certain percentage, you would still get paid that certain percentage?
The contract really was that we would get paid for the hours we put in. But at any point in time, no matter what the contract says, our clients can stop the work. If it's not going well, they'll stop the work. And this agile process that I mentioned is crucial because it allows for frequent deliverables. They need to be able to see what they're getting. This $1 million project was over a year in length.
Right.
However, every 6 weeks, they had a deliverable that they were able to test and evaluate and see how we're doing. So there were no guesses. They didn't need the risk of an unpleasant surprise down at the end. Yes?
I'm fascinated by this period of time in between when you were working for the software subsidiary and actually starting Chariot. I'm wondering how long that time was in between being let go of that other company and starting Chariot, and what were the things you did during that period of time that were the most effective for you in being able to get Chariot started off on the right feet with the right people?
Okay. So what was the length of time, the time period between when the software company, the decision was made to sell that business until we started Chariot? And what did we do during that time? There was not much time. That was also late 2001. I would say there were 3 or 4 months. And what I did best is go door to door with these mentors, as I mentioned, this group of mentors, and get help more than anything else, and then sit with our people. We spent quite a bit of time talking about what we would do. What would we do? What could we be? Who could we, what assets did we really have? I didn't even know. Then I had to spend the time talking with this A team. Was this A team, they weren't mine, I didn't own them. Were they going to be part of the acquirer? Once I found out they were not, then I spent a lot of time with them to see, and a couple of them were not a fit for Chariot. But that's where the time was, and working on the business plan, and that wasn't the most enjoyable thing I ever did either, but I had some really, really good coaching. And then raising money, also, felt like I was going door to door like this. I didn't have much experience raising money, and I hope I don't have to do it too much in the future. But it's achievable, it's just difficult.
I may have missed this, I was behind the camera when you were speaking, but I know that utilization was one of your real targets, that 80 to 90% utilization to get you the margin that you need to keep going and growing as a company. Did utilization drive the philosophy for a lean and mean team, or did the lean, was there a relationship there between this concentrated, premium priced, high-end A team? Is that complementary to the utilization, or are they driven by different factors? And how do you maintain that high utilization today, given that you have fluctuating demands of project dynamics?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, so we strive for 80% utilization, and we really, on average, end up with about 75% utilization, which may be why our bottom line isn't quite 10% of our top line. That's not really what drives us. How we're able to keep the utilization up is because demand so far outweighs supply, and it still does to this day. So in most cases, ideally in our business, and this is part of our strategy, is to have a 2 to 4 person bench. That allows us to sell. Well, for most of these 8 years, we haven't had a bench at all, and that makes it difficult. And so, again, this demand that's out there, it's more work, than we could really handle, but it also allows us to only pick the projects. And again, it's part of our philosophy. Only take on projects where we'll be successful. Don't risk the track record.
And do you find you can shift team members to other projects when they're getting slow and
Absolutely.
your team is that good to?
Absolutely. On a regular basis, yes. We do that all the time. Yes?
Did you find it hard to find find the IT professional that actually does understand the business aspect of your field?
Do we find it hard to find these technical gurus that actually understand business and can thrive in that environment? And yes, we do. You have to go through, like I said, we've gone through 35 candidates to hire one. And that is part of the reason. The technology is one part, but like I said, I think 15% are qualified in the technology. But we're only hiring, what's that, 33%, less than 3% of those that we interview. And it's because of things like the business environment and their understanding of it. And it depends in some cases on their schooling, but in most cases on their experience. If they've worked in that environment before, they understand. Sometimes you have to take, it's not a fancy way. It's the way that works and it's most practical. It's not for school or to show off. It counts about dollars and return on investment for our clients. And that's a great challenge for us. That's a big part of our process. Our interview process, it starts on the tech side, but it also continues on the business side, making sure people are really a fit in the business climate.
Do you have a software that tests them to see?
Well, we have tests, code tests, design exercises, more technical. On the business side, we don't have that. What we have is part of the second to last interview involves questions about their background in terms of business and projects, what they have done to get a feel for it. And then we have the final interview, and that's me. And it's not as much of an interview, it's not an interview for the technical skills, because they have way more technical skills than I do. But I focus a lot more on the business and on their professionalism. And if they have the right attitude and professionalism, we can teach them technologies. That's a smaller part of it. Learning a language is really no big deal. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit, excuse me, about your pricing structure in terms of do you ask for 20% in advance, or how much do you ask for based on certain milestones? And then do you divulge your hourly rate? And if so, do clients sort of bean count, or you don't, you just give them a flat fee, or is it based on phases? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So talk about our pricing. Questions about pricing. Pricing is another challenge. In theory, I mentioned about putting our money where our mouths are. And instead of looking at hourly rate, you need to consider the hours. If we can do the job in half the time, then let's calculate this out. Well, if that's all true, then why don't we work on fixed price, on a fixed price basis? If we want to compare apples with apples, compare total costs, right? That makes a lot of sense. Well, easier said than done. Fixed price projects are scary, and they are risky. And in some cases, we do it. And I would tell you, share something with you that we're so close with our customers that on a huge project for us, we had done some smaller fixed price jobs. I had always been reluctant to do $1 million fixed price job because if there's that variance could really hurt a small company if you're behind. But we made a deal. We want to learn to do better on these fixed price jobs, the larger ones. And so we made a deal with our customer that, let's say it was $1 million price tag, but it was a very friendly deal that if we went way over, we would renegotiate reasonably with them. They were willing to do that. We had already proven ourselves to them. And if we made a killing, that we would give them some back. So really, it was this huge fixed price job without the risk. And it went really well, but it still is difficult to take $1 million fixed price job. So our rates are out there. Our people are $150 an hour. That's what they are. And as far as getting money up front, the key is focusing on the prospect in this case. It's not so much about us. But a lot of companies, they don't pay their bills eventually. You have to look into them. Or if they're a startup and they don't have a track record, you can't look them up on D&B, then we need to get money up front. And that's a big part of what we do. So when we deal with, and we do help a lot of startups in many cases, we do need to get something up front, call it usually for us, I believe it's more like 10%. And that gets taken away, that gets subtracted from the final bill. So we at least hold a little bit. It's more of good faith or a goodwill gesture than anything else.
So in terms of that flat fee project that you were talking about, was that outlined in the contract that you guys would renegotiate if you went over, or was that just a verbal agreement?
Are you in law school? I'm sorry. Well, in this case, that was actually just a verbal agreement. That's not what I recommend to all of you. But we were very tight, you know, and this customer actually had been burned by other companies out there quite a bit. And we had a history of, they know our kind of people, and they know we are trustworthy. Otherwise, yes, it really should be in the contract. Yes?
How long does it take you to go through the hiring process if you're, you know, going with the interview 35 to get one, and how many rounds, and yeah, everyone's different, of course, but generally speaking, what is your expectation?
Well, we hope to weed out many of them in the phone screen that happens first. Before we get to these exhaustive, long interviews with tests and so on. But we find it takes time, no matter how you look at it. Still, to get through that process, it takes a matter of, even with the right candidate, it takes weeks before we end up hiring them, because there's multiple visits that we have to go through, and there's a lot before anyone gets let in the door. And this is something I don't mess with. If I did, we might occasionally let someone in who's not quite there, because there's all this business out there that we could get, but we've had the discipline to say we don't hire people who are pretty good fits. We hire great fits, and that's it. Or we don't mind, we'll pass on the business if we have to. But it takes a long time, and that's what, again, the growth we've had pretty consistent growth. We've grown almost all but 1 year we have grown. But it's on this slower pace, again, than the exponential growth. That's largely because of how long it takes to hire someone. Yes?
You're talking a lot about your employees. My customer deals with your customers, and after you do your deliverable on your software product or whatever the product is, how do you get back and kind of farm more work from them, or service level agreements? Do you offer stuff like that with your
Sure.
customers?
Yes, we do.
How do they come back to you, and do you use word of mouth?
So really, once we get into a client, let's say, and get that first project, how do we create that repeat business and this consistency? And it takes a lot of effort on the sales side. So for every customer we have an account manager, and we have a project lead, and both of them, as part of their job, is to look for other opportunities. Okay, where else can we help? Usually by the end of the first project, and this usually comes from the people out there in the field, they are able to propose something else. We usually go back to the clients. We're looking for low-hanging fruit where they can get big bang for the buck. And it really starts with the people who are there. And not the salesperson doesn't know as much about it, but it's their role to make sure this keeps moving forward. Actually, I'm sorry, I dissed you before. Yes.
I have a question about your growth strategy. So how do you balance organic growth versus acquisitions, and what is your acquisition screening? Because it's so important that you preserve that cultural element to your company. So how does that influence some acquisition targets? And have you done one, and has it gone well or not so well?
So the question is about acquisitions, and it's an excellent question. We have not done an acquisition, but we have evaluated a couple of them. And it's very challenging. I don't hold out high hopes that we will find. And when we've done it and we've looked under what's there at these other companies, what we find is a subset of the group is great, and they're a great fit, and the rest of them don't really belong. And it doesn't make much sense for us to do an acquisition in that case. We're open to it in the future, but we have grown strictly organically because we haven't found the perfect fit.
So that's criteria number one, does it mesh well with our existing strategy?
Yes.
As compared to just trying to grow into a space or bolt something on that you don't have experience in?
Yes, that's correct. Okay, two more? Okay, there'll be one and then two, okay?
So as you started as a very small company, as a startup, and moved to 50 employees, how has your role as CEO changed in terms of the time commitment to different specific tasks? I mean, maybe if you could break it down even the percentages, that would be helpful. And then do you see that continuing as you continue to grow, if you're aiming to 100, and how do you personally deal with that?
Okay, so how has my role changed as we have grown from when we started to where we are now, 50-something employees? And then as we continue to grow, how do I expect my role to change? And my role has changed a lot, but my role is more of a coach than what you might look at or expect from a CEO. my time is broken down, is mostly in meetings, making sure we're making progress in all the areas we need to. And you have to understand I didn't share with you our specific goals and objectives, and I mentioned this prioritized list, but I'll mention a little bit of it. We've all agreed that if we just take care of the top 3, the rest, and none of them have to do with profit or revenue or anything, any numbers like that. But the rest will take care of itself. And the top 3, well, one of them, any of the top 3 is, how do I explain this? The top 3 are the top priorities. Everyone's top priority falls in that top 3. For most of our people, 40-something people, our consultants, their top priority is to sustain our near-perfect client satisfaction record. For Tracy, her top priority is to enhance our brand as a best-of-breed provider of the services we provide. And for me, my number 1 priority is to enhance the loyalty, value, and satisfaction of our team. So my job, and this is the bulk of my job, is to treat these people like the gods that they are in my eyes. And it's a very rewarding job. Now, the other part is dealing with crises, which, I signed up for this. You can't really get away from that. But I have to say, it's been just an incredibly pleasant experience, and it has led to some great balance. And another thing I would like to add is I never realized the satisfaction you can get, the return, but of being this high quality provider, being a hero to our customers. It's just, I can't describe how great it is to go out and get this positive praise, to get letters from CEOs saying that our people did more with a team of 2 than in 10 weeks than a team of 6 for a year. It's great. It's very satisfying, very rewarding, and I know everybody feels good about being a part of this team. Yes?
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your fundraising process, and specifically where you were able to find your private investors and what you thought you did effectively to actually get the funding.
Well, I found them. It's an interesting story. I started with my own little list of my potential investors, and then one of my mentors introduced me to a lawyer, a law firm downtown here, Deckert. I went in there and talked about raising money, and the first thing my attorney said to me is, "Are these all qualified investors?" And I said, "I don't know what that is. What's a qualified investor?" And he said, "Well, that means someone that has a net worth of $1 million or more, or combined with their spouse, they make $300,000 or more a year." And I was a bit puzzled. That makes them a qualified investor. And he said, "Well, it has to do with liability. If they're of a certain status, they're expected to know what they're getting themselves into. And if they're not, and they lose all their money, they may have some recourse. Whether they win or not, they may be able to come after me." And I said, "Well, there goes most of my list." He said, "Your dad's okay. Don't worry, your dad's not going to come after you." But he said, it's a very serious point. And in fact, what happened was, he said, "Give me some copies of your business plan. I have some clients. We'll see what we can do." Funny thing is, then I got a call. I went out to find my own people also, and then I got a phone call from Vincent Bell Jr. Didn't know who it was. This old guy came out and was doing all this research. I knew Buck Bell. I didn't know Vincent Bell Jr. Of course, that's his real name. And that's the luck. One part of the luck that's involved. That's how I found him. He was one of the clients of my lawyer, and ultimately, Buck became an investor and an extremely valuable board member. But I went out. Again, it's about this mentor group. And I had to sell. Where we got the money is I had to go out there and sell it. I had to believe it. And if I don't believe it, I can't sell ice to the Eskimos. It's not going to happen. But I believed in it. I had seen it proven to me. And so I'm sure that had something to do with it. That said, I still stopped short. I actually went out to Buck's office when I still had 3 lots left to sell. And he was the only one left on my list. And he said, "How much do you have left?" And I said, "Well, I have 3 lots to sell. No one's taken more than 1. He said, "All right, well, I'll take 2. And Jay Tolson will take a 3rd. And I said, "Well, who's Jay Tolson?" He said, "He's one of my cronies. We share investment ideas." But I said, "Well, I'd love to meet him." But I said, "No one's taken more than 1 lot." And he said, "Well, do you want me to do this or not?" I said, "Well, sure I do, of course." I said, "I don't know what to say. You've made my day, my week, my month. If you look out your window and you see some guy doing these horrible excuse for cartwheels, don't worry, I won't hurt myself. I can't feel any pain right now." And that's the truth, and that's how it went down.
So the initial list was from your advisory board and some of your mentors identifying those initial prospects?
Yes. Yes. Okay. I'll be around so you guys will be able to ask me questions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thanks again to Mike, and thanks to Wharton and Real Arts Media for recording this. Our next Entrepreneurs Unplugged will be here again in 2 months.